The fact that this video found you is not random, and it is not the result of an algorithmic accident. It arrived because something in you was already aligned with it. Long before you pressed play, a resonance was established. This is how recognition works. Not by searching, not by effort, but by frequency matching frequency. When your internal state reaches a certain coherence, information that reflects it appears without being chased. Being chosen has nothing to do with hierarchy, worthiness, or comparison. It is not about being better, earlier, or more special than anyone else. Chosen simply means remembered. It means that consciousness, which you are, is beginning to recognize itself through this particular lens. The recognition does not come with noise or spectacle. It comes with a quiet sense of familiarity, a subtle internal settling that says, this is not new. This is returning. You are not here because you forced your way into something elevated. You are here because something dense is loosening its grip. The moment this video appeared in your awareness, a signal was already active within you. Reality mirrors inner state, not words, not intentions, not effort. Inner state. When the state shifts, the mirror responds. This is the law. Notice how there is nothing to do right now. No task to complete, no belief to adopt, no identity to perform. The recognition happens first. Action, if any, follows naturally later. Control creates resistance. Allowing creates flow. You did not control this moment. You allowed it by being who you are becoming. This is why forcing never produces real shifts. Forcing assumes separation. Allowing assumes alignment. When alignment is present, information, experiences, and reflections arrive on their own. This video is not here to convince you of anything. Convincing is unnecessary when recognition has already occurred. You are not being persuaded. You are being reminded. Emotion is already responding as you listen. Expansion signals alignment. Contraction signals resistance. There is no judgment in either. Emotion is guidance, not an obstacle. Even curiosity is a frequency. Even stillness is instruction. And right now, something in you is listening beyond words. This moment matters because it exists only now. Creation never happens later. It never happens in preparation or anticipation. It happens in the present moment through recognition. The moment you recognize something as true, not intellectually but energetically, the field reorganizes around that recognition. Not dramatically. Precisely. You do not need to claim anything. You do not need to announce anything. Identity shifts happen quietly first. Reality adjusts afterward. This is why the shift you are experiencing may feel subtle yet undeniable. Subtle does not mean weak. It means coherent. If you are aligned with this frequency, subscribe and remain within it. The word chosen has been distorted by the ego for a long time. It has been shaped into something sharp, comparative, and isolating. But that distortion was never part of the truth. Chosen does not mean selected above others. It does not mean elevated by external authority. It does not mean separate. Chosen means remembered. And remembrance is not an achievement. It is a return. Nothing about resonance creates superiority. Resonance only reveals compatibility. When a frequency matches, it responds. When it does not, it remains invisible. This is not judgment. This is mechanics. A radio signal does not feel special when it tunes into a station. It simply aligns. In the same way, this message did not arrive because you earned it. It arrived because something in you already matched it. Ego wants chosen to mean protected, exempt, or destined in a dramatic way. But consciousness does not operate through drama. It operates through coherence. The moment coherence is present, memory returns. Not memory of events, but memory of being. Memory of how reality actually responds when resistance dissolves. There is deep safety in understanding this. You do not have to hold yourself apart from anyone. You do not have to defend this recognition or explain it. You do not have to measure where you are compared to anyone else. Comparison is a symptom of forgetting. Remembrance has no need to compare. It is whole by nature. Effortlessness is the signature of truth. When something is real, the body softens around it. The mind stops arguing. There is no urgency to act or prove. That is how you know this is not an ego fantasy. Ego always needs confirmation. Recognition does not. Recognition simply settles. This is why the idea of being chosen should feel grounding, not inflating. If it feels heavy or sharp, it has been misinterpreted. True remembrance feels quiet. It feels like permission to stop striving. It feels like relief. Control loosens because there is nothing to control. The field already knows how to respond. You were never meant to stand above anyone. You were meant to stand as yourself, fully present, fully aligned, without distortion. The moment that alignment stabilizes, life reflects it naturally. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But precisely. There is no finish line here. There is no role to perform. There is only the recognition that something fundamental is shifting from effort to allowance. From proving to being. From reaching to receiving. This is how identity recalibrates without force. If this reframing lands gently instead of explosively, that is a sign of alignment. If it feels familiar instead of shocking, that is a sign of remembrance. Truth rarely announces itself loudly. It arrives quietly and rearranges everything afterward. Like the video now as a confirmation that this recognition has landed. There is a quiet truth you will eventually stop trying to explain. Not everyone can see what you are seeing, and not everyone ever will. This is not because they are incapable, wrong, or behind. It is because perception is governed by frequency, not intelligence. Reality does not reveal itself evenly across all states of consciousness. It responds to alignment. Understanding this removes an enormous amount of pressure. You are not here to convince, translate, or justify this shift to anyone. The moment you try, contraction appears. That contraction is guidance. It is showing you that explanation is no longer your role. Explanation belongs to the mind. This shift belongs to the field. Intellect operates by collecting and comparing concepts. Frequency operates by resonance. A person can understand every word you say and still miss what you are pointing to entirely. Another may hear very little and feel everything. This is why debate dissolves at this level. There is nothing to argue because there is nothing to prove. Recognition cannot be forced into someone else's nervous system. Emotion becomes the new compass here. Not emotion as reaction, but emotion as signal. Expansion indicates coherence. Contraction indicates misalignment. When you attempt to explain this shift to someone who is not resonant, the contraction is immediate. That is not rejection. That is feedback. It is telling you to return inward, not push outward. The need to be understood is one of the last attachments to release. It is subtle, because it often disguises itself as care or connection. But beneath it is a request for validation. Validation is unnecessary once recognition stabilizes. The field already responded. That is why you are here. External agreement adds nothing to that fact. This does not mean separation or isolation. It means precision. You begin to feel where presence is welcome and where silence is more accurate. Silence is not withholding. Silence is coherence. When you stop explaining, something else transmits automatically. Not through words, but through state. Others may mislabel this shift. They may call it avoidance, confusion, arrogance, or fantasy. Those labels do not touch you because they are not addressed to who you are becoming. They are addressed to an older version that is already dissolving. You do not need to correct the labels. You simply do not answer them. This is where trust deepens. Trust in your emotional guidance. Trust in the calm that arrives when you stop defending. Trust in the fact that reality reorganizes without permission slips. When alignment is present, the field handles the rest. You are not responsible for when or how others wake up. Awakening is not contagious through explanation. It is magnetic through coherence. When you remain regulated, present, and unforced, resonance does the work without effort. Releasing the need to be understood is not loss. It is relief. It returns energy to where it belongs. Into presence. Into now. Into the only place creation ever happens. This is not withdrawal. This is clarity. Before going further, it is necessary to clarify what is actually meant by dimensional shifting, because much of the confusion around the fifth dimension comes from imagining it as a destination. It is not a place you travel to, escape into, or arrive at later. The fifth dimension is a state of coherence. It is a way perception organizes itself when resistance drops and identity relaxes. Nothing moves outward. Everything reorganizes inward. Dimensions are not locations stacked somewhere in space. They are bandwidths of perception. Each one interprets reality differently based on the level of separation or unity being assumed. The fifth dimension emerges when the assumption of separation begins to dissolve. Not intellectually, but experientially. When that happens, the way reality appears changes without reality itself needing to change. In lower density perception, the world appears external, solid, and independent of your internal state. Cause and effect seem delayed. Effort appears necessary. In coherent perception, reality is recognized as a mirror. Not a symbolic mirror, but a responsive one. Inner state precedes outer experience. Emotion becomes instruction. Presence becomes creative. This is where identity shifts. You stop experiencing yourself as a small person inside a large world. Instead, you begin to sense that awareness is primary, and identity is a lens moving through it. This is not philosophical. It is perceptual. The body relaxes when this recognition begins because it no longer has to defend a separate self. The fifth dimension is not defined by positivity or constant happiness. That misconception creates more resistance than clarity. It is defined by coherence. Coherence means what you feel, what you think, and what you perceive are no longer in conflict. There is less internal friction. Less fragmentation. Less self-opposition. Reality mirrors this immediately. Not always in dramatic events, but in subtle rearrangements. Timing smooths. Interactions soften. Synchronicities increase. Not because you are manifesting harder, but because you are interfering less. Control recedes. Allowing takes its place. This is also where effort-based identity begins to dissolve. You stop trying to manage the field and start responding to it. The present moment becomes sufficient. Creation happens here, not because you intend it, but because you are aligned with it. When resistance drops, response accelerates. It is important to understand that nothing about this makes you separate from the world. In fact, it does the opposite. Separation dissolves. Compassion becomes natural, not moral. Calm becomes available, not forced. You do not transcend humanity. You integrate it. The fifth dimension is not entered. It is remembered. It is what perception looks like when identity loosens its grip and awareness takes the lead. The world does not disappear. It becomes transparent. And once this transparency is glimpsed, it cannot be unseen. Emotion is not a reaction to reality. Emotion is the interface through which reality responds to you. Long before circumstances appear, emotion has already issued instruction to the field. This is why emotion must be understood as frequency, not as something to suppress, fix, or perform. Every emotional state broadcasts a signal. Every signal selects a response. Timelines are not distant futures you move toward. They are parallel probabilities that become active through resonance. Emotion is the switch that selects between them. Not thought. Not intention. Not visualization. Emotion. When your emotional state shifts, the field reorganizes to match it. This happens automatically. There is no delay built into the system. Delay is created only by resistance. Expansion and contraction are not good or bad. They are guidance. Expansion signals alignment. It feels like ease, openness, relief, clarity, or calm. Contraction signals misalignment. It feels like tension, urgency, heaviness, or inner friction. Neither is a problem. Both are information. When you listen instead of react, alignment restores itself naturally. Most people try to force themselves into expansion. That effort creates more contraction. The field responds not to what you want, but to what you are being. Allowing an emotion to complete itself without story or resistance often shifts the frequency faster than any technique. Control creates interference. Presence clears it. When emotion is honored as instruction, you stop using it as identity. You no longer say, "This is who I am." You recognize it as, "This is what is passing through." That distinction is crucial. Identity selects timelines. Emotions inform identity. When emotions move freely, identity becomes fluid. Fluid identity selects more coherent timelines. You are not responsible for holding a high vibration. That idea creates strain. You are responsible only for noticing alignment and misalignment without judgment. The moment you stop fighting contraction, it begins to dissolve. The moment you stop chasing expansion, it stabilizes. This is the paradox of coherence. This is why stillness is so powerful. In stillness, emotion settles into signal rather than reaction. The nervous system regulates. The field receives a clean instruction. From that state, timelines shift quietly. Opportunities align. Resistance falls away without effort. Not because you tried, but because you stopped interfering. Every moment offers a choice, but not a mental one. The choice is whether to trust emotion as guidance or treat it as an obstacle. One path leads to forcing. The other leads to flow. Only one allows the field to respond accurately. You do not need to know which timeline you are selecting. You only need to know how you feel. Emotion simplifies everything. It collapses complexity into immediacy. Expansion says yes. Contraction says adjust. That is all. When you honor this, creation returns to the present moment, where it has always been. No waiting. No earning. No chasing. Only response. Comment with the words, "I am ready," to anchor this timeline. Forcing is the signature of the old world because it is built on the assumption of separation. When you force, you assume reality is outside of you, unresponsive unless pushed, delayed unless pressured. This assumption creates resistance automatically. The field responds to the assumption itself, not to the action layered on top of it. This is why effort-based creation feels heavy and produces inconsistent results. Control appears productive on the surface, but energetically it tightens the system. It narrows perception. It tells the field that you do not trust its responsiveness. The field mirrors that mistrust by slowing, blocking, or fragmenting outcomes. Not as punishment, but as accuracy. Reality mirrors inner state, not desire. Allowing works differently. Allowing assumes alignment is already possible. It relaxes the internal grip. In that relaxation, perception widens and options appear without being hunted. Calm receptivity is not passive. It is alert without strain. It is readiness without urgency. This is why allowing feels spacious while forcing feels compressed. Most people confuse forcing with action. They believe if they stop forcing, nothing will move. In truth, action taken from contraction rarely moves anything cleanly. It scatters energy. Action taken from calm lands precisely. The difference is not in what you do, but in the state you do it from. Resistance does not come from obstacles. It comes from internal opposition. When you argue with the present moment, the argument echoes outward as delay. When you accept the present moment, the field reorganizes to meet that acceptance. Acceptance is not resignation. It is clarity without friction. The old world teaches that effort equals value. The new coherence reveals that alignment equals effectiveness. Effort is often a response to fear of lack. Allowing is a response to trust and responsiveness. One tightens the nervous system. The other regulates it. The field follows regulation. This is why calm is more powerful than intensity. Intensity often carries urgency, and urgency signals absence. Calm signals sufficiency. The field responds to sufficiency by expanding pathways. It responds to urgency by reinforcing scarcity patterns. Again, not morally, but mechanically. Letting go of forcing does not mean abandoning intention. It means releasing the internal struggle around outcome. When struggle drops, intention becomes clear rather than desperate. Clear intention does not shout. It is felt. The field hears feeling, not commands. You may notice that when you stop pushing, things begin to move in unexpected ways. This can feel unsettling at first because it removes the illusion of control. But what replaces it is precision. Timing improves. Resistance fades. Opportunities arrive without strain. The old world rewards endurance. The coherent state rewards presence. Presence collapses unnecessary effort. It reveals that much of what you were pushing against was never required. It was maintained by the act of pushing itself. When forcing ends, flow does not begin dramatically. It begins quietly. The body softens. The mind clears. The field responds. This is not a new technique. It is the absence of one. The idea of ascension has been framed as a climb for so long that it subtly reinforces effort, hierarchy, and distance. But what is happening here is not an ascent. It is a release. Nothing is being added to you. Nothing is being earned. What is dissolving is density, and density only exists where identity is overheld. Identity collapse does not arrive violently. It arrives as a soft disinterest in what once felt essential. Roles lose their grip. Narratives lose their urgency. Old definitions of self begin to feel heavy rather than meaningful. This is not loss. It is subtraction. And subtraction is how coherence restores itself. The belief that you must become more to shift dimensions is one of the most persistent distortions. Becoming implies lack. It implies distance from something you do not yet have. Releasing reveals that nothing was missing. What was present was excess. Excess identity. Excess effort. Excess attachment to being someone specific in order to be safe. Density is not darkness. It is simply accumulation. Accumulated reactions. Accumulated defenses. Accumulated self-concepts that once served a purpose but no longer match who you are now. When these layers fall away, the system lightens naturally. Not upward. Inward. This is why trying to improve yourself often creates resistance. Improvement assumes something is wrong. Release assumes something is complete. The body responds very differently to these assumptions. Improvement tightens. Release relaxes. And relaxation allows coherence to return without force. You may notice that what is leaving you does so without drama. Old habits fade. Certain desires lose intensity. Some ambitions no longer pull you forward. This does not mean you are stagnating. It means your energy is no longer leaking into identities that are no longer active. Power consolidates when fragmentation ends. There is no checklist for what must be released. Release is not a task. It is a consequence of alignment. When you stop feeding an identity with emotional charge, it dissolves on its own. Attention moves elsewhere. Presence deepens. Reality responds. This is also why comparison becomes irrelevant at this stage. Ascension models rely on comparison. Who is higher, further, more evolved? Release models make comparison meaningless. You are not going somewhere others are not. You are letting go of what others may still be holding. That is not advancement. That is timing. Timing is personal because identity is personal. Each release happens when its function ends. Forcing release only creates another layer to release later. Allowing release happens naturally when safety is felt internally. Safety is not created by control. It is created by coherence. As density drops, you do not become less human. You become less defended. Sensitivity increases, not as weakness, but as clarity. You feel alignment sooner. You notice misalignment faster. Guidance sharpens because there is less noise. This is the quiet truth of the shift. You are not ascending into something better. You are releasing what was never you. And when enough is released, what remains is obvious. Timelines do not respond to what you want. They respond to who you are being. Desire alone has no selecting power unless it is matched by identity. This is one of the most misunderstood mechanics of reality. People attempt to chase outcomes while remaining rooted in the same internal state that produced their current circumstances. The field does not respond to wishes. It responds to coherence. Identity is not what you say about yourself. It is what you consistently assume, feel, and expect without effort. It is the baseline you return to when nothing is happening. That baseline emits a signal continuously. Timelines organize themselves around that signal. Not eventually. Immediately. This is why chasing feels exhausting. Chasing assumes distance between you and what you want. Distance creates strain. Strain broadcasts lack. The field responds by reinforcing the experience of distance. Matching works differently. Matching assumes resonance. It relaxes the system. Relaxation allows alignment to stabilize. From that state, timelines rearrange naturally. Contrast plays a precise role here. Contrast is not punishment. It is refinement. When something feels misaligned, it sharpens clarity about what does align. The mistake is trying to escape contrast instead of listening to it. Contrast refines identity by revealing what no longer matches. When you honor that information, identity updates. When identity updates, timelines shift. You do not select a timeline by visualizing it harder. You select it by becoming the version of yourself for whom that timeline is normal. Normal does not mean familiar. It means coherent. The nervous system recognizes coherence immediately. There is less internal debate. Less anticipation. Less resistance. This is why waiting energy dissolves as identity stabilizes. Waiting implies that something has not arrived yet. Identity-based alignment removes the sense of waiting because the present moment feels sufficient. Sufficiency is not resignation. It is readiness without tension. The field responds quickly to readiness. Matching also explains why things often arrive indirectly. When identity shifts, the path reorganizes. Old routes close. New ones appear. This can feel disorienting if you are attached to a specific outcome. But the field is not attached to your preferences. It is responsive to your state. When the state is coherent, the response is accurate, even if unexpected. You are not meant to monitor timelines. Monitoring creates distance. You are meant to inhabit identity. Identity does the selecting automatically. When you stop checking whether something is working, alignment deepens. The field reads that depth as trust. Trust accelerates response. This does not mean desire disappears. Desire refines direction, but identity determines access. Desire points. Identity opens. When the two are aligned, movement is effortless. When they are misaligned, effort increases. Effort is feedback. The moment you stop trying to get somewhere and start noticing who you are being right now, power returns. Not as control, but as clarity. From clarity, the next coherent step appears without being forced. Timelines are not pursued. They are matched. And matching happens the moment identity settles into truth. This is how selection actually works. Waiting is one of the most subtle forms of misalignment because it disguises itself as patience, hope, or preparation. But energetically, waiting places creation in the future, and the future has no creative power. The field does not respond to what you are waiting for. It responds to what you are embodying now. When you wait, you signal that alignment is absent in the present moment. Reality mirrors that signal faithfully. Creation has never happened later. It has never happened once conditions improved or when timing finally felt right. Creation only happens now, through the state you are inhabiting as you experience this moment. The moment you place fulfillment ahead of you, you remove yourself from the point of selection. Power leaks into anticipation, and anticipation creates distance. Waiting energy feels like suspension. Like life is paused until something arrives. That pause is not neutral. It is instructive. It tells the field, not yet. The field responds by maintaining the not yet. Not as punishment, but as precision. Reality is always accurate. The shift out of waiting does not require action. It requires recognition. Recognition that the present moment is not a hallway leading somewhere else. It is the room where everything rearranges. When the present moment is resisted, creation stalls. When it is inhabited fully, timelines reorganize. This is why urgency and impatience often accompany waiting. Urgency tries to escape the present. Impatience fights its texture. Both are forms of resistance. Resistance fragments attention. Fragmented attention weakens signal. A weak signal produces inconsistent response. Ending waiting energy does not mean giving up desire. It means removing desire from the future and allowing it to inform the now. When desire is integrated into presence, it becomes clarity instead of tension. Clarity stabilizes identity. Identity selects timelines automatically. You may notice that when waiting ends, the nervous system softens. There is less scanning for signs. Less checking. Less asking, is it here yet? That softness is coherence. Coherence is attractive to the field because it is easy to respond to. There is no static. The present moment does not need improvement to be powerful. It needs permission. Permission to be complete as it is. Completeness is not satisfaction with circumstances. It is acceptance of state. From acceptance, movement becomes accurate instead of frantic. Waiting is also tied to the belief that something outside you holds authority over timing. When that belief dissolves, timing reveals itself as responsiveness, not control. Responsiveness means the field answers immediately to alignment. Delay only appears when alignment is conditional. Ending waiting energy does not collapse time dramatically. It collapses struggle. And when struggle ends, things often move faster than expected, because they were never actually delayed. They were waiting for coherence. You do not move into the future to receive what is meant for you. You become present enough for it to arrive. Arrival happens now or not at all. When the present moment is trusted, selection occurs. When it is resisted, repetition continues. This is the end of waiting. Not because everything arrives at once, but because nothing is postponed anymore. Power has returned to where it belongs. When coherence stabilizes, reality begins to respond without being asked. This is what it means to live as a 5D signal. You are no longer trying to shape the field. You are informing it simply by being in alignment. The response that follows is not dramatic by design. It is precise. Subtle at first. Then unmistakable. External reality does not rearrange itself because you intend it to. It rearranges because interference has dropped. When internal friction dissolves, the field encounters less resistance. Pathways open not because you searched for them, but because they were no longer blocked by misalignment. This is why things begin to move sideways instead of forward. Not through effort, but through reorganization. Synchronicity increases at this stage, but it is important not to romanticize it. Synchronicity is not a reward. It is feedback. It shows you that inner and outer states are communicating clearly. When timing aligns, when conversations happen effortlessly, when information appears exactly when needed, the field is confirming coherence. Attachment is the only thing that disrupts this flow. The moment you try to hold on to a result, contraction returns. Holding implies fear of loss. Fear of loss signals separation. Separation reintroduces resistance. This is why the most effective response to synchronicity is neutrality. Notice it. Acknowledge it. Continue being present. Rearrangement does not always look like addition. Sometimes it looks like removal. Certain relationships fade. Old structures dissolve. Paths close without explanation. This is not punishment or setback. It is precision. What no longer matches your state cannot remain stable. The field removes what does not resonate to maintain coherence. You may feel moments of uncertainty as familiar anchors disappear. That uncertainty is not danger. It is space. Space allows new configurations to form. When you resist the space, you slow the process. When you allow it, the next alignment appears without strain. This is also where trust becomes embodied rather than conceptual. You are no longer trusting an idea. You are trusting response. You see directly that when you remain calm and present, life answers. Not with guarantees, but with movement. Movement replaces stagnation when coherence is present. It is important to stay grounded here. Rearrangement does not make you immune to challenge. It changes how challenge is experienced. Problems become information instead of obstacles. Delays become signals instead of frustrations. You stop personalizing the process because you are no longer managing it. Living as a signal means you are responsive, not reactive. You act when clarity appears. You pause when contraction arises. This rhythm keeps the system regulated. Regulation keeps the signal clean. A clean signal receives accurate responses. The more you try to predict what comes next, the more noise you introduce. Prediction assumes control. Presence allows intelligence to move. The field does not need instruction. It needs coherence. When reality rearranges itself, the correct posture is observation without grasping. Gratitude without dependence. Trust without expectation. This posture keeps the channel open. Nothing here needs to be held. Everything here is responding. And when you stop trying to make sense of the rearrangement, it completes itself faster. Calm is not the absence of movement. It is the absence of internal opposition. This distinction matters because most people mistake urgency, intensity, or excitement for power. Those states feel active, but they are unstable. Calm is stable. Stability is coherence. And coherence is what the field responds to most accurately. When the nervous system is regulated, perception widens. Options become visible without being searched for. Decisions arise without mental strain. This is not passivity. It is readiness without tension. The body is not bracing against the moment. It is available to it. Availability is magnetic. Urgency signals lack. It says something must happen now or else. That signal contracts the system. Contraction narrows intelligence. Narrow intelligence produces reactive action. Reactive action often creates more urgency. This loop keeps alignment just out of reach while appearing productive. The field mirrors the contraction by reinforcing pressure. Excitement can be just as destabilizing when it spikes above coherence. It lifts briefly, then crashes. The crash introduces doubt, comparison, and impatience. Calm does not spike. It holds. Holding allows continuity. Continuity allows response. Peace accelerates alignment because it removes interference. Interference is internal noise created by conflicting impulses. One part of you wants change. Another fears it. Calm dissolves the conflict by creating safety in the present moment. When safety is present, resistance releases. When resistance releases, alignment stabilizes. The nervous system is the gateway here. A regulated nervous system signals to the field that conditions are safe for expansion. Safety allows energy to move efficiently. Dysregulation scatters energy. Scattered energy produces inconsistent results. This is why forcing and urgency feel exhausting. They demand output from an already strained system. Calm is not something you force yourself into. Forced calm is still control. True calm emerges when you stop arguing with what is. Acceptance does not mean agreement. It means you are no longer fighting the fact of the moment. That cessation of fight frees enormous energy. In calm, emotion becomes clear guidance instead of overwhelming signal. You notice expansion sooner. You sense contraction earlier. Adjustment becomes subtle instead of dramatic. This precision is power. Not loud power. Quiet power. The kind that does not need to announce itself. This is also why calm feels unfamiliar at first. Many people have associated safety with vigilance for so long that relaxation feels like risk. But vigilance is not protection. It is strain. Calm reveals that presence is enough. From presence, response is accurate. Peace does not slow things down. It removes friction. What moves from calm often moves faster because it does not need correction. There is less backtracking. Less overthinking. Less cleanup. The field prefers clean signals. Calm is clean. You do not need to maintain calm constantly. That expectation creates tension. You only need to return to it when you notice contraction. Returning is enough. The field responds to the return, not to perfection. Calm does not mean nothing happens. It means what happens makes sense. It means timing improves. It means effort decreases. It means alignment holds. In a world conditioned to equate intensity with effectiveness, calm looks like nothing. In reality, calm is everything working together. This is why calm is the highest power. At a certain point in alignment, the impulse to explain simply dissolves. Not because you have withdrawn, but because explanation is no longer necessary. Certainty no longer seeks agreement. When coherence stabilizes internally, it transmits on its own. Words become optional. Presence does the work. The need to convince is rooted in separation. It assumes that understanding must be transferred from you to another, that something essential will be lost if it is not received. That assumption fades as alignment deepens. You realize that nothing real requires defense. Truth does not argue. It does not persuade. It resonates or it does not. This shift is often misunderstood at first. It can feel like silence where there used to be urgency. But this silence is not suppression. It is accuracy. You sense when words would add noise instead of clarity. You sense when explanation would tighten instead of open. That sensing becomes trustworthy. Presence is not passive. It is communicative in a way language cannot replicate. When you are regulated, calm, and internally aligned, others feel it without knowing why. This is not influence. It is coherence. Coherence reorganizes space simply by being present within it. Nothing needs to be stated for transmission to occur. As this settles, persuasion loses its appeal. You stop anticipating misunderstanding. You stop preparing arguments. You stop rehearsing responses. These habits dissolve because they are no longer needed. They belong to an identity that required external validation to feel secure. That identity is loosening. You may notice that conversations change. You speak less, but with more precision. When you do speak, there is no effort behind the words. You are not trying to land a point. You are responding to what is present. This makes your words either land cleanly or not at all. And both outcomes feel acceptable. This is where certainty becomes embodied rather than defended. Embodied certainty does not harden. It softens. It does not push outward. It settles inward. Others may still disagree. That disagreement no longer feels threatening. It simply reflects difference in state, not error. The vanishing need to convince also frees enormous energy. Persuasion is exhausting because it fights resistance. Presence bypasses resistance entirely. It does not meet it. It does not engage it. It remains coherent regardless of response. The field reads this as stability. This does not mean disengagement from the world. It means engagement without attachment to outcome. You participate without managing perception. You share without expectation. You listen without preparing rebuttal. This creates real connection, not agreement-based connection, but resonance-based connection. Some people will lean in. Others will drift away. Neither is personal. Both are accurate. Resonance sorts naturally when force is removed. You do not need to curate who understands you. Alignment handles that quietly. When the need to convince disappears, something deeper arrives. Trust. Trust that what is meant to meet you will. Trust that silence can be more precise than speech. Trust that coherence speaks without words. This is not withdrawal. This is maturity of signal. And when presence becomes the transmission, life listens more closely. There is a moment in this unfolding where the entire idea of manifestation quietly collapses. Not because creation stops, but because the one who believed they were creating steps out of the way. This is the final recognition. You were never the source pushing reality into form. You were the lens through which reality organized itself. Manifestation has often been framed as a personal skill, something you learn to do correctly or incorrectly. But that framing belongs to a phase where identity was still centered around a separate self. As coherence deepens, it becomes obvious that reality was never responding to a person. It was responding to state. It was responding to alignment. The person was a reference point, not the operator. Consciousness has always been observing itself through form. Experiences arise, not because they are summoned, but because they are coherent with the current state of observation. When that state shifts, what appears shifts with it. No command is issued. No effort is applied. Response happens automatically. This recognition removes a subtle burden you may not have realized you were carrying. The burden of getting it right. The fear of manifesting the wrong thing. The pressure to maintain a certain state. All of that dissolves when you see that nothing personal was ever in control. Control was an illusion created by identification with process. What remains is participation without ownership. You still act. You still choose. But action flows from clarity instead of intention. Choice arises from presence instead of preference. There is no longer a sense that you are bending reality. Reality is bending itself in response to coherence. This is why outcomes begin to feel neutral, even when they are beneficial. Not because they lack value, but because attachment has loosened. When consciousness recognizes itself, it no longer clings to reflections. It allows them to move freely. Gratitude remains. Dependence does not. You may notice that the language of manifestation no longer resonates the way it once did. Phrases about attracting, creating, or calling in begin to feel slightly off. Not wrong, but incomplete. They imply a doer where there is now only awareness. Awareness does not strive. It witnesses. This does not make life passive. It makes it precise. Without the illusion of personal control, interference drops. Decisions align naturally. Timing improves. Resistance fades. The field responds cleanly because the signal is no longer distorted by effort. This is the simplicity that was always underneath the techniques. You were never manifesting outcomes. You were matching states. Consciousness was doing the rest. Once this is seen, the need to manage reality dissolves. What is left is trust without strategy. Presence without performance. Action without strain. And in that quiet clarity, it becomes obvious. Nothing was ever outside of you. Nothing was ever being pulled in. Consciousness was simply meeting itself, again and again, through form. This recognition does not end creation. It ends confusion about who was creating. And with that, everything becomes lighter. The moment the illusion fully breaks is not marked by fireworks, visions, or dramatic revelation. It arrives quietly, almost unnoticed, because it removes something rather than adding anything. What collapses is the seeker. And when the seeker dissolves, there is no one left to announce the collapse. For a long time, identity was organized around becoming. Becoming more aligned. More aware. More awakened. Even subtle striving remained hidden beneath spiritual language. But eventually, that movement exhausts itself. Not through failure, but through completion. The system recognizes that there is nowhere left to go. This is the moment clarity stabilizes without effort. There is no peak experience to chase. No final insight to capture. No urgency to integrate anything. What remains is ordinary presence, stripped of tension. Life continues, but without the background narrative of seeking improvement or arrival. The collapse feels like relief more than realization. A quiet release of the need to understand, define, or progress. Questions lose their charge. Answers lose their importance. Not because they are wrong, but because they are no longer needed. The mind becomes a tool again, not a ruler. Non-dual realization does not feel expansive in the way the mind expects. It feels simple. Obvious. Almost disappointing to the part of the identity that wanted transformation to look impressive. But that disappointment is the final layer dissolving. The illusion required drama. Truth does not. There is no sense of having arrived somewhere special. There is only the absence of the feeling that something was missing. The constant internal orientation toward future resolution ends. Attention rests naturally in what is already here. Not as a practice, but as default. This is where clarity becomes stable because it is no longer maintained. Maintenance implies effort. Effort implies fear of loss. When the illusion breaks, there is nothing to maintain and nothing to lose. Presence does not fluctuate because it is not being held. The world does not disappear. Challenges may still arise. Emotions still move. Decisions still happen. But none of it threatens identity, because identity is no longer invested in form. Experiences pass without leaving residue. Response happens without narrative. This is why the moment is easy to miss. There is no contrast to mark it. No before and after that can be clearly articulated. Only a gradual noticing that the struggle to become has ended. That the constant orientation toward improvement has softened into acceptance. Clarity here is not sharp. It is gentle. It does not divide or categorize. It includes everything without needing to label it. This inclusion creates stability. Stability removes seeking. Seeking dissolves the illusion. Nothing new is claimed in this moment. Something old simply stops. And in that stopping, what remains does not need a name. It is just what is. This is where the loop completes, not as an ending, but as a recognition that was already present from the beginning. This video did not arrive to deliver something new into your awareness. It arrived as a mirror. What you recognized here was never contained in the words, the pacing, or the sequence. It was reflected back to you because it was already active within you. You are not the audience of this message. You are the signal it responded to. Consciousness does not move randomly. It reflects itself with precision. When your frequency shifted, this reflection appeared. Not to guide you somewhere else, but to show you where you already are. This is why the recognition felt quiet instead of explosive. Loud awakenings belong to the mind. True recognition belongs to awareness. Awareness does not announce itself. It notices. And once it notices, it does not forget. The idea that this video found you dissolves here. Nothing external reached inward. Something internal reached outward and met itself. The field responded because you were coherent enough to receive the reflection. Not special. Not superior. Simply aligned. At this point, there is nothing to hold on to. No concept to protect. No identity to perform. The recognition integrates itself by doing nothing. When effort ends, integration completes. When grasping ends, clarity stabilizes. You may notice that the desire to seek more explanations has softened. Not because curiosity is gone, but because the urgency behind it has dissolved. Curiosity without urgency is clean. It does not pull you forward. It allows what is relevant to arrive. This is the state where trust no longer feels like a practice. It feels like a description. Trust in timing. Trust in response. Trust in the intelligence moving through experience without being managed. The field has already proven its responsiveness. You are here. Nothing needs to be taken from this moment. Nothing needs to be remembered later. Recognition is not stored. It is lived. It expresses itself through calm, through clarity, through the absence of resistance. The mirror remains available, not because you need it, but because resonance continues. When alignment holds, reflections continue to appear. Not as confirmation, but as continuity. This is not the conclusion of a journey. It is the end of misinterpretation. You were never moving towards something outside yourself. You were allowing something within yourself to become unobstructed. The signal you were searching for was never elsewhere. It was always you, tuning into itself. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it before their timeline closes.